the international platforms, and a lot of good techniques of social networking which we need to learn from you, Dr. Malay Patel. And really, and it's a really nice, you feel proud, and I wish that he keeps on going higher and higher up. And we will really like to, invite you to give this lecture, please. Thank you, Dr. Patel. We will not waste any more time.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Can
just
you hear me
before,
now?
yes, Dr. Patel, just before you go on, I'll just like to
Dr. Rahul, you there? Actually, your voice is not coming.
yeah, I'm there. Can
Okay,
you hear me?
Yeah, it's fine now.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Patel, you can join, please. Dr. Malay Patel. Yeah. Vishal, all the mics to be switched off.
Right,
Please.
sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I visible and audible?
Right, sir.
Okay, righto. So, Rahul, thank you for that introduction. Yes, and what you say is, I have started in a movement in which I see so many people coming along from India. Rahul, you are one of them. Of course, there are several others who have joined this international movement. So basically, we have to project India on the international scenario, and all you guys are doing an awesome job. And of course, that is what I always wanted, and that is what we want for India. So let me start my talk today. And first of all, I thank Servier, who has always been with us. And Poonam, of course, has been with us for several years now. Probably in some time we will start calling that association in decades rather than years. So that's how it is. And Poonam, as we all, pardon my using the few words next to that I'm going to use, as we age together. So,
right.
So pardon my, but yes, so I'm going to talk to you about, first I'm going to give you two talks. One is about the echosclerotherapy and why it is, I think it should be done in a way that I have learned how to do it. And the second part of the talk would be avoiding the complications that we see in sclerotherapy. The sclerotherapy has been extended to treat so many other conditions like venous malformations, and in different parts of the body, that it has now just gained almost universal acceptance for certain things. And so let me just start this off. And okay, so echosclerotherapy is the sole method for treating superficial venous reflux. Some of you may have heard this talk. Of course, Rahul and everybody must have heard this before. But for all those who are new here, this is something that you must learn. So over the last decade, and it is now almost about a little bit above the decade that we have all started discovering chemical endoablation. Now you're seeing more and more usage of chemical endoablation, but the initial chemical endoablation was done with the use of foam sclerosant. Of course, it was liquid first and then foam came along. So now, what are the salient aspects of our method? And if you are going to use foam sclerotherapy as your sole method, then you have to be very careful that you are going to use this in a way that has been explained to the patient, that you will be using this over multiple sessions and at multiple sites. And so we have probably diverged a little, and it's a long-term treatment. If you expect, basically varicose veins has to be treated over some time. You cannot just do it a one-shot therapy. And as everybody is continuing to learn, that you have to repeat certain procedures. And so simplicity and effectiveness should make it a natural winner. And there are multiple injections at multiple sites and multiple follow-ups. So the treatment is not in one go. And how you foam the sclerosant, it's about 1 to 3 cc's of the sclerosant foam is injected at a single site, but limited to 5 cc's at a single site. And use Luer-Lok 5 cc syringes, 26 gauge, 1.5 inch or 3.8 centimeter needles. And I'll also touch upon this when I talk about avoiding complications in foam sclerotherapy. The Tessari method, well-known method of 1 cc's of 3% sodium tetradecyl sulfate or polydocanol with 4 cc's of gas. Prefer to use a physiological gas. So you can use carbon dioxide or a mixture of carbon dioxide and oxygen 30%, carbon dioxide 70%, and that would give you a very good foam, which of course does not last as long as the foam produced by air, but it will be very safe. And we have switched over to totally using carbon dioxide in 2008. And after carbon dioxide, the occasional post-procedural tightness of chest and giddiness has almost vanished. We use maximum 20 cc's of foam in one session if we have to, otherwise we limit ourselves to 10 cc's. And then we look for a banded line. Now what I'm going to show you is not usually mentioned in books, because all these things that come by experience. People learn their own ways of doing this, and one develops their own rhythm, the way of doing this. And this is what you have to see. This is the needle coming into a vein, these 26 gauge needle. What you are now going to see is a traverse of the foam retrograde, which means that there is a spasm proximally, and that now you will see a banded line here. So I inject caudocranially and watch for the foam moving retrograde. So that is your first indication that the vein proximally has gone into spasm and the foam is now occupying the whole vein. So the first session is for 3 consecutive days. If you are using sodium tetradecyl sulfate, which is fibrovein, then of course you will have very good results in the trunk. The leg is elevated at an angle of 45 to 60 degrees for 30 minutes, and then you can mobilize the patient. If bilateral, do it on a subsequent day. And follow-ups, at each follow-up, re-inject 1 to 2 days if required. And you can have follow-ups at 3 to 6 weeks. You cannot be very rigid in India about the follow-ups, because whenever you call the patients, they usually don't show up. They may show up at some later stage. Once they get used to the therapy or the treatment, they will then realize that they can take some make some excuses of not coming on time. And last follow-up should be done at 1 year. No initial compression is used in my practice because my patients are very reluctant to wear, but I do recommend that you can start with below knee stockings. And if there is more pain after compression, then you may have to modify that. Now, this is what I have learned over time. Ultrasound at all patients at follow-ups. Re-inject a segment if there is grayscale movement, there is compressibility, there is color on compression or on use of power Doppler, and there are echolucent areas. So what I'm going to show you now is this exactly re-injections. This is where you see echolucent areas, compressibility. There's a needle I'm trying to come into the vein, and as I come in, you can see it broke through, but I'm injecting, and you can see the way the foam is breaking up. And the way the foam breaks up, you realize that there are some sclerosed areas, thrombosed areas inside the vein that are now getting foam. So that's one aspect. And this is an anterior accessory vein that is joining into the great saphenous vein in the upper thigh, and then you can see it called dipping down into the deeper vein. This is another injection that I have used. You can see this. This is the level of the skin. So you have injected here, and then you can see that the foam, now there it goes, because the probe, the ultrasound probe is now trying to move the foam into a direction. Again, this is something under the skin. There you go, very close. This is the level of the skin. And this is the foam in the varicosity just underneath the skin. Now, there is probably no other method by which you can get these varicose veins except by foam sclerotherapy, and ultrasound guidance is the way to use it. So please memorize all these 4 criteria that we have learned, and nobody will be able to do any clinical trial based upon what is what and what is the proof and what is the weightage of all of this. You have to understand that no ethics committee will give permission for you to now do that trial. So this comes along as we have experienced that. And this is again foam breaking through into a treated area and moving up ahead. So I'll keep on showing you a few slides like this. See, these are again varicosities. You can see equilucent areas, some compressibility, and there is my needle coming in. This was an area that was treated before, but because the foam may not have been adequate, or it got diluted, or whatever was the reason, this is how it just keeps on going. Again, another, see some equilucent areas, compressibility. See the way the foam breaks through, the needle and the foam now going through. There you see, and there you see it's breaking through some of the trabeculations, going in and going into the vein that was previously treated, and this foam will now have good effect. Again, more and more of those videos that I'm going to show you. And the ultrasound probe, see, this is some foam that has come from the distal area. So this is a giveaway that there is still some connection with this varicosity, and now this requires some treatment. So again, the needle going through, again ultrasound guidance. To reiterate, this is the skin, and this is about 4 centimeters. This is how deep your probe will be able to see. If it's a good probe, vascular probe, this is what we all need. Just a 4 centimeters depth, and that's it. See, I'm trying to break through the thrombus or the sclerus or whatever you want to call it, and that's the needle going through. At the same time, I'm giving some slight pressure on the plunger, and there you see all the foam going through. So this is some part that comes by you're doing more and more of this. Again, this is a perforator. This is a perforator. So that's the needle going through. Usually, I would like to inject into the veins that are here under the skin. So that was the perforator. I don't think that film came up real well, but anyway, that was a perforator that was injected, and these are more treated veins that are injected again. See, look at the size of that vein. So it's been re-injected. See, ultimately, I will get the vein. It does not matter. So what your recanalization rates are, what your recurrence is, it just does not matter. See, this is again a treated vein. You can see some of the thrombus that has been lining, it's lining the walls. So you have to find that equilucent area and go in. So there you go. A needle is, I'm trying to get into the, just a little pressure on the, and there it is. There you see the foam going through. Modern ultrasounds are minds and machine, but this resolution can be improved much better with the larger machines. So whoever is starting new, if you have the new machine, you will see things even in more detail. But this is for practical purposes, you should be okay with these sorts of machines. Again, a treated area. Now this is eccolution, compressibility is present, some grayscale movement when you see this. Again, needle going through and trying to break in through into an area, and that's it. The way the foam breaks out, you know that there was some previous thrombus or sclerus in there. So that's how it goes. Again, more onto the anterior accessory. I usually try to go up to the anterior accessory and its junction with the great saphenous vein and something above. I don't try and go very close to the junction. Try to stay about at least 4 to 5 centimeters away from the saphenofemoral junction, because you do not want that foam to enter into larger quantities into the femoral vein, though it will not create any problems. But try to be careful, because you try to be careful and you will end up having a very safe procedure. So that's the needle coming again. And these veins were never seen. So you see them once the foam comes in. Again, some compressibility, some eccolucent areas, and some grayscale movement. So more foam is required into this area. Otherwise, this will recanalize and there will be an early failure, and everybody will say that, oh, these veins came back. But basically, it's about how you repeat the procedure. So don't be afraid to tell your patient that you will have to have repeated procedures. And have a dedicated person do all this. Because if you are going to, or a dedicated time when you do all this. That part of the vein was never seen. And the foam lights it up, and you see the foam going into the vein subcutaneously, quite close to the skin. So we have learned to kill any vein around the ulcer, not to inject through lipodermatosclerotic skin for about 10 to 15 days or wait longer, or you may want to inject through the normal skin in the upper half of the leg towards, with your needle pointing towards the foot. So you go retrograde, and then you can probably be more comfortable and safe to inject that. And waiting improves the quality of the sclerotic skin. So we all differ in treating the same problem, but the principles will stay the same. And this is how you will be able to treat even your venous malformations. But there is a time to standardize the method, and as like Rahul said, that over the next 10 years or so, we are going to see a lot of standardization taking place. And simplicity is the best method. So thank you for this talk. And now I will take you to my next talk of avoiding complications in foam sclerotherapy. So that's what I am going to now talk about, and how to avoid complications. So these are the contents of the talk, how you basically divide your or you subgroup your all your you have 9 different variables in which you take care of everything, and you will have minimal complications, or your complication rates will be very rare. So what's your sclerosant agent, your type of foam, ultrasound guidance, hardware, volume of injected foam, injection site, extravasation, systemic predisposing factors, and post-procedure advice. So this is the definition basically of sclerotherapy, which is taken from the European guidelines. And I have taken this. Sclerotherapy is the targeted chemical ablation of varicose veins. So this is the key word here, the chemical ablation. This is getting into mainstream use, and this is how we are using this word. And it's intravenous injection of a liquid or foam sclerosing agent, I have removed the word drug because it has negative connotations in North America and probably even in India. That is, a drug is something that you use to get intoxicated. And the treated veins may be intradermal, subcutaneous, endotransfacial, as well as superficial and deep in venous malformations. Now, what is the sclerosant agent then? So the commonest types are the sodium tetradecyl sulfate and polydocanol. Source your sclerosants from established suppliers that follow current good manufacturing practices. In the past, we have burned our fingers by using some sort of sclerosant that were there in the market at that time. And this was a period about 10 years ago or 12 years ago when we had quite a few adverse reactions, but we hardly see any adverse reactions these days with the sclerosants that are currently in the market. Molecular, and that was a problem. There was a molecular formula was similar, but the structural formula was dissimilar. And this is my personal data. We tested that molecule, and anybody who wants to see it can be seen it privately, and you will be shocked to realize that how these products come from China that have the same molecular formula, but have a different structural formula. Initially, carbitol and other contaminant labels were detectable in STD or polydocanol, but they are no longer there in these compounds. So carbitol has been almost removed, and there is a certain amount below which it has to be, almost undetectable is what the FDAs now recommend. Or the STD of in the British Pharmacopoeia has benzyl alcohol, which is historically was used as a preservative, but it also got some local anesthetic effect. So STD without benzyl alcohol is more painful. So if you are going to use an STD or a sodium tetradecyl sulfate, use one which conforms to the British Pharmacopoeia. What's your hardware? I said lower lock, low silicon syringes. You have to find out which is the best silicon or non-silicon syringe is the best. But if you are going to only have low silicon silicon syringes in your hospital, then you would have to find out which is the one that will not damage the foam, or what should I say, in the sense that the foam will last longer in a very low silicon syringe. And some people use all glass syringes. I don't know how they do that, but some people have described using all glass syringes. Foam in glass lasts the longest. And these are the needles that you want to use, 22, 23, 26. The thinner the needle, you must understand that when the foam comes out from the tip of the needle, the foam is partly converted into liquid, so you will have less foam, more liquid than what you will have in a 22 or a 23 gauge. These are simple rules of physics, high school physics, and so I don't need to go more into that. But 26 gauge is my preference, so I am very sure that the foam that I create is very fresh. A two-way connector or three-way stop valve to create the foam, and syringes. Now here comes the most important part, and I'll refer to this later. The syringes that require the least break loose or breakaway force and the gliding force are to be preferred. Now, when you start pushing on a syringe, what happens is that you have a breakaway force and then there is a gliding force. If you are not familiar with that syringe, then a jerky gliding movement will be produced, and this can spurt in sudden, more than expected foam volumes at high pressure. Remember that smaller the syringe, like a 2 cc syringe, you can effectively produce suprasystolic pressures at the tip of the needle. And there have been instances in which, or it is very commonly seen that in a radial arterial line, you can actually inject right up to the subclavian artery against the arterial pressure. Certain silicone syringes can make foam unstable and shorten the duration of microbubbles. Now, ultrasound guidance. This is the most important, and I cannot stress this less. a linear broad spectrum vascular ultrasound probe, assistant with ultrasound is the norm. Either you have somebody in the room to hold the probe or you can hold the probe, but better is to have somebody to hold the probe for you. Predetermine the flow in the target, especially in the lower half of the leg, and don't inject if there is suspicion of pulsatile flow or visualization of an artery. This is very important and very important to minimize your chances of having cutaneous necrosis. Visualize the sural and saphenous nerves. Modern ultrasound machines will be able to do that. And what's your type of foam? The type of foam to be produced is described as viscous, fine bubbled, homogeneous, and is produced by the Desari method with 1 cc of liquid and 4 cc of gas. 1 to 3% concentration of foam spherosomes are injurious for larger veins. So you can be sure that even if you use something in between, you are going to produce the desired effect. Air has a grade 1A recommendation. I am sure that this will change over time because physiological gases will give you better outcomes, clinical outcomes. Carbon dioxide is our preference. 70% carbon dioxide and 30% oxygen right now is a grade 2B recommendation, and you can use it. 1 cc of liquid, either sodium tetrahydrocal sulfate or polydophenol, and 5 cc of air, carbon dioxide, or a mixture of carbon dioxide and oxygen. Now, what is the injection site? I start injecting distal to proximal. There are a few people in the world who inject from proximal to distal. That is your personal preference. Avoid lipodermatosclerotic areas, and in such areas, the injection can be retrograde with the puncture from a relatively normal skin. 0.1 to 0.2 cc's of test injection, first followed by critical observation, and then push the rest of the volume. Stop injecting 5 centimeters short of any deep vein junction with the saphenous or the superficial vein junction. Stop injecting if there is a bleb or a wheal or there is development of pallor, and abort injecting if there is immediate severe pain. Start with a small 1 to 2 cc's volume of foam, and up to 2 to 4 cc's of volume can be injected at a single site. Leg elevation by emptying the veins decreases the hyperpigmentation, and maximum 10 cc's as per European guidelines and 20 cc's as per Australasian guidelines. But this is not evidence-based and relies on expert opinions. Historically, this has been an expert opinion that was brought into this number 10 cc's and 20 cc's. And like I tell everybody, that there will be no ethics committee that will now allow you to experiment with this volume in future. So this is now going to stick with us. You increase your pressure gradually on the plunger of the syringe to overcome the break loose or breakaway force, and watch the ultrasound screen to confirm that it is an intraluminal injection, basically an intravenous injection. And formation of a triple banded line, 2 narrow bands with a central broad band, and retrograde flow of the foam mark the optimal injection. And I will now show you the video about that. This is, as I said, 4 centimeters deep. This is the foam going in. And if you see 2 narrow bands followed by a broad band of foam, this is the foam, and this is the vein walls. This is a very good injection. You can almost forget this segment, or this segment is now going to go. Finish all over. This is about a 3 centimeters deep segment. And you inject the foam again. And retrograde injection, as I said, the retrograde traverse of the foam is the site. This is the same video that you have seen in the previous talk. And so, again, injecting into a segment, ultrasound guidance, again, most important. And there you go. I have actually gone beyond the vein, removed my needle, re-injected, and now back into it. Now you can see some foam breaking out here. This is breaking out through the side of the needle because there is some pressure involved. Don't worry about that. And I'm going to show you about all that. Again, close to the skin, you can inject close to the skin. Should not be a problem. I usually do not dilute it up to 1%. I'll probably just go half and half. So that's 1.5%. Again, the same videos as you've seen before, but just to make sure that I'm trying to reinforce what I'm trying to say all the time. Ultrasound guidance. Be very sure that you are inside the lumen. And there you go. See, again, some breakage of the foam or probably spillage is being seen outside. And that's what brings us to extravasation. Everybody is afraid initially of the extravasation. Don't be afraid, and I'll tell you why. So avoid syringes that require higher breakaway forces as the jerky movements while gliding as they inject unpredictable volumes. Cutaneous necrosis is very rare and is misattributed to extravasation and is mostly due to an inadvertent injection into an artery. You injecting a spider vein with higher pressure causing veno-arteriolar reflux. Or there is reflex arteriospasm. And these are extravasations that I've had. I have not deliberately done this, but these are the extravasations that I've had. These disappear the next day. Unless or until this foam enters into an arteriole or it is close to an artery, only then will it create a problem of an arterial spasm or arteriolar spasm and cutaneous necrosis. Remember that polidocanol historically was developed as a local anesthetic agent. And that's how it was used initially, but it didn't work that well. This is again extravasation. So special note on injection technique. Commonly, sclerosants are injected with 2 to 5 cc syringes, and smaller diameter syringes generate higher pressures. In a resting syringe, the initial breakaway force is overcome by the thumb pressure, and the plunger then starts moving through the barrel. Now this, you have to break apart in your mind your injection. We all do it very automatically, but when you're specially doing it for foam, you have to just go back and relearn the process. Now your injection is maintained by the glide force that overcomes the friction of the plunger within the barrel. The pressure at the tip of a needle attached to the syringe can easily exceed systolic arterial pressure, and it is not surprising that sclerosant can travel retrograde or circuitously into arterioles. And this is where a liquid can travel easily, retrogradely or circuitously into an arteriole, creating problems. Remember that complications with sclerotherapy are the same whether you are using foam or using liquid, but liquid has a greater propensity of traveling into an arteriole, and that is why it has been, it has become badly named as something that produces a sort of a cutaneous necrosis. A study of simulated injections carried out showed that even experienced injectors generated variations in flow rates due to difficulty produced by syringe feel and maintaining continuous pressure. This was a trial that was done several years ago, and competent and very experienced anesthesiologists were given and made injections, and their pressures were measured by scientifically using those instruments. Thus, not only are high pressures generated at the tips of the injection needle, but bursts of fluid expulsion can occur. Now, special note on trapped blood or coagulum. Complications are very rare, but among them, trapped blood is the commonest. It shows up as a painful erythematous area. The peak of a coagulated vein may be seen in the central area. It has to be evacuated, and then that area should be re-injected to take care of a feeder. It is very likely that there is a feeder, especially if there is a grayscale movement on ultrasound. And this is what you will see, some telangiectatic matting and blood coagulum here and in this vein. See the vein here. This has to be evacuated, otherwise the patient will keep on complaining of pain for about 1 or 2 weeks. Ice packing has to be advised, and you can use a large bore needle or a small nick with a knife, 11 blade knife. This is an example of cutaneous necrosis that, though this was a bunch of varicose veins here, though the injection was exactly in the vein, what has happened is that due to the pressure, the foam has now burst out through the vein wall and probably has entered into some arteriole or some arterial circulation in that area. So this was, I think, on the day 2 after treatment. This is day 6 or 7 after treatment. So that was one thing. This is an sclerosant liquid that was injected in the vein and producing this area of cutaneous necrosis. This is my case that had developed. This patient has been coming to me for 7 years, and these are all the heel ulcers, and everything was just a mess around in the leg, and it was different arteriovenous communications that developed. It took almost a year to heal, but this patient, because he was a faithful patient, never grumbled, was very grateful that I have taken care of his legs. So be careful when you have such a problem. You will not have a happy patient. Again, that is the site of that necrotic skin that ultimately required nothing but just dressings, but that's a nuisance. So it will occur very rarely, and by very rarely I mean it will be more than 1 in 5, less than 1 in 5,000. So your systemic predisposing factors. Serious complications to sclerosants are attributed to release of histamine and endothelin. Large patent foramen oval. Now, when I say large patent foramen oval, you have to have a right to left shunt. Like Harry Bedi would be able to tell us that, so many people have small holes between the intraarterial atrial septum, but a large one to produce a left to right shunt is what you have to be careful about. Migraine, asthma, thrombophilias, and hypercoagulable states. So these are the things that you should avoid or at least be able to get from the patient. And this is a composite diagram of what actually is the cause for these allergic reactions. It is kinins, endothelins, and ultimately you have a common pathway that produces vein spasm, capillary dilatation, could be hypotension, could be a vagal syndrome. It's a pseudo-allergic reaction. Now, these are basically complications also related to patient apprehension. So if you have a comfortable patient, your complication rates arising from such situations is going to go down drastically. And what is the post-procedure advice? Compression may be used, immediate ambulation for 10 to 20 minutes after that initial rest, prolonged more than 5 hours vehicular and air travel in the first week is to be avoided unless there are frequent breaks with mobilization. Any complication of pain, redness, and discoloration of the skin is to be reported as soon as possible, and any change in consciousness and vision is to be reported immediately. Exposure to sunlight is not considered a factor in increasing hyperpigmentation. And these are the references. I think this is being recorded, so you can have all these references that you want to go through. And there are about 21 references here. So just please feel free to get the transcript of the talk and go through that. So that's how it is, and that's how I am now. I think at the end of the talk, and we can now go on to the discussion or whatever questions, whatever people may want.
Thank you, Dr. Patel.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Malay Patel. It was fantastic.
Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Patel, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you for such a nice lecture, and I really like to thank, there are a lot of people who have joined our seminar. Dr. PC Gupta is there from Vascular Society of India. Dr. Ayman is here from Egypt.
PC, welcome, PC. Special
Dr.
welcome to PC.
Dr. Ayman is there from Egypt.
Oh wow! Hey, hi, Ayman.
And Dr. H.S. Bedi is there. And Dr. Deki
Wadia
is there.
I see Basam Al-Rawani and lot of people. Yes.
Right. So I will start the ball rolling, Dr. Patel, and please, anybody of you has questions, please put it into the chat so that we can look into the chat and answer your questions. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions. I will start the ball rolling. Just two questions comes into my mind. One is, why carbon dioxide you use as your first preference as compared to air? When you look into the guidelines, air has got a 1A, given by the all recommendations as compared to the CO2.
It is, historically, I understand that, air has a higher recommendation. There is no question about that. Now, when I talked about the allergic reactions that I initially had, what used to happen is that at that time I was not sure whether I was using a very pure sclerosant or it was the air that was creating the problems. Now, air definitely had some problems because you can understand that nitrogen is not absorbed easily in the circulation. Carbon dioxide has a much greater absorbability than even oxygen with the red blood cells. So when you are using carbon dioxide, you are almost theoretically and physiologically you are okay. So that when the carbon dioxide enters into the general circulation, it is gone. It is no longer there. And when you using air, which is like almost 78% nitrogen, you are having bubbles that can probably go through all over the different parts of the body. So that's the only reason why we have. And as I said, recommendation for CO2 and CO2 oxygen may probably just come up to level 1 now, 1C, or even not even up to there. But this is what is now being gradually followed across the world.
Sure. Dr. Piyush Chaudhary.
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Yeah, hi. Can you take up the question from the chat, and please? Yeah.
Right, sir. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Malay sir.
Yeah, good evening.
So there is first question waiting up, and it's about the follow-up period. So question is from Dr. Anjali, and question is how to decide that the patient requires the second sitting.
Yes, Anjali, good question. And the four criteria that we have now listed, when you have a vein that is compressible on a follow-up, if you have echolucent areas, you have some grayscale movement inside, you have color flashing up on the color Doppler, or when you use the power Doppler, you have some color flashing up, then understand that this is an area that has still got some free fluid inside, which is basically blood, and you have to take care of that again. So you have to re-inject.
Yeah.
So does it answer your question, Anjali?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Piyush, next question, please. Yeah.
Sir, I am looking at the second follow-up question also from Dr. Anjali only. So, what you do especially in superficial thrombophlebitis? So, if there is superficial thrombophlebitis.
Yeah. So superficial thrombophlebitis is, again, thrombophlebitis is a controversial term nowadays. So if you have an ascending thrombophlebitis or an ascending thrombus that is in the lower upper leg or the lower thigh, and you find that it is going increasing proximally, you can inject above. That's what I do. I will inject above the upper limit of the thrombus and sclerose that vein, so that thrombus can now no longer extend upwards, and at the same time you can start this patient on low molecular weight heparin or the direct oral anticoagulants. So this is what I do.
Okay, sir. So we have one more question from Usha Rani. So question is that, have you ever seen any case of pulmonary fibrosis as a complication of sclerotherapy?
Well, not yet. I mean, my follow-up's not been that, we haven't gone that long into the follow-up, but theoretically, you will not be seeing pulmonary fibrosis, and there are reasons to it. First of all, your sclerosant on the microbubble is already gone by the time it goes into the deeper veins. It takes about just less than 8 seconds for all the sclerosant to be used up. Remember that your sclerosant reacts with any cell membrane. Any cell membrane means it could be not only the endothelium, it will be the RBCs, platelets, WBCs, and any other cell that is floating around in the blood. The other thing that takes up the sclerosant is the albumin. The albumin inside the blood will take up and neutralize the sclerosant. So we are very sure from these, extrapolating these theoretical considerations, that by the time the microbubble reaches the lung, it is just a bubble of air or nitrogen, or maybe the case with the physiological gas. By that time, it is only nothing but just gas. So people across the world are not bothered about seeing pulmonary fibrosis in future. But if we see, then of course, we will be some of the first people to hear about it. Yes.
Okay,
next
sir.
Question, please.
Yeah. So next question is from Osama Shohaber, and he wants to ask that what should be the maximum vein diameter for good and successful injection?
This has been an eternal debate about using sclerotherapy. Some people say not more than 8 millimeters, not more than 12 millimeters, and so on and so forth. I have not limited myself to the size. What I have done is that if I see a vein that is more than 10 millimeters in width, you have different maneuvers. You can raise the leg before the procedure. You can use sodium tetradecyl sulfate 3% at a time. You can re-inject. So basically, I am not bothered about the diameter of the vein, because ultimately I will get it in a re-injection.
Dr. Patel, I will ask one question. Hello, Dr. Patel,
Yes,
can you hear?
yes, Rahul. Yeah.
I want to ask a future question. Is there any new sclerosant in the pipeline?
There are two things that I'd like to say. There is an off-label use of glucose 75% that goes around in South America. So it's not a new thing, but you can use that. In India, we do not get the 75%, so you can use the 50%. Now, I'll give you a little tip here. And once again, this comes from the Latin American countries. What they have done is they mix, they take about 0.8 ml of glucose and 0.2 ml of polydocanol, 3%. So you can now foam up that glucose. You understand? So that's one variation to the technique. But I think there is one being developed, or there was one sclerosant that was being developed in Colombia. I forget the name. Jorge was working on that, and that was doing some good sclerosant. But I have not seen much about it coming into the market. So no, I'm not sure about. I'm not sure. I mean, anybody else here who is aware of anything coming on in the future? Otherwise, we are just using these two.
Sure. Dr. Dekiwadia, you want to ask a question, please?
Yeah, how to avoid this coagulum formation?
Deki, good afternoon, good evening. So, yes, I think what is the emptying of the vein, either before the procedure, you can raise the leg, empty the vein, and then inject so that you have minimal amount of blood. The other thing is that post-injection compression. So your vein is empty of blood. And thirdly is to keep the leg elevated after the procedure. So again, it is, and then inject small quantities, about 2 to 3 cc's at one point, and then move on to a proximal area and inject again. So you have a whole column of foam occupying that segment of vein. So that's how you would be able to minimize that. But you will not be able to avoid a coagulum formation. That's for sure.
Most of the time, what we see is the moment you inject, the foam travels towards the heart, towards and then you do not really have a stable column of foam anywhere.
No.
And we have tried to elevate the limb and then inject, then you, with difficulty, you get the vein, and then once you puncture the vein, then elevate the leg and then inject, it becomes cumbersome for many veins to inject. So,
what I do
has been a challenge. Yeah. I need more inputs to avoid this.
Sure, sir. What I do is a very simple technique I started doing around 3 years back, and we practice it as a routine. By just volume, you can understand we do around 60-70 cases a month, not in this time, but like before, of foam. And we hardly have to take the coagulum out, maybe 1 patient a month, not more than that. And what we do is the moment we don't raise the legs and all. The moment we inject the foam, the moment the needle is there, I will start injecting. I'll simultaneously with my left hand compress the vein. So I do an ultrasound guided puncture and keep a positive pressure on the needle.
Dr. Rahul, you there?
Yeah, we lost his audio, I think.
Right.
Hello.
So,
Rahul, you'll have to reply because.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I was just sorry, taken out.
Dr. Malay.
Yes.
Hello.
Dr. Malay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Dr. Malay, Dr. Rajiv Sharda here.
Hey, Rajiv.
Dr. Rajiv Sharda from Bhopal, and I have one question for you. That what is your recommendation for post-sclerotherapy dressing? So, do you go for this dressings or simple compressive is sufficient for post-sclerotherapy patient?
No, the needle hole doesn't require anything.
No, I'm asking about the post-sclerotherapy dressing. What is your recommendation for post-sclerotherapy dressings?
If there are ulcers, that is what you are asking?
No, doctor. He is asking is what do we do? Like, do we compress?
Dressing.
Yeah. What do we do? What we do? Do we use as a compression? Do we use a stockings or do we use a tight bandaging? And what is the protocol post-operative?
If your patient is already using the compression before you have started the treatment, you should apply that same compression back again. Otherwise, you can apply a compression wrap and call the patient, because when you apply and when you call the patient the next day, it is a very good way of compressing the sclerosed part.
Rahul, could you complete, because we had lost your audio in between after injecting, what you do?
Yeah. So what we do is, once we put in the needle inside with the right hand with a constant positive pressure, so that there is, Vishal, can you just mics, please?
Right,
Vishal,
sir. Right, sir.
And so when we are injecting from the right hand, we keep a positive pressure on the needle so that there is no blood which enters the syringe. And then we leave the ultrasound, and with the left hand, I compress the veins. And then I slowly inject, by which we found two things. One is, where I would require 4 ml of foam, I could get away only with 1 ml of foam, because the veins are totally compressed. And I will inject, I got some idea on the vein, rough idea, like how much foam this veins will require. So I will inject only that amount. I keep it on the lower side and then take the needle out and then keep it pressed for 30 seconds with both the hands, that area, and then do an ultrasound again. So what you will observe is that most of the veins where you thought will require a 4 ml foam, you will get away with only 1 ml foam, and everything has gone into spasm. So I think because of the low volumes of the foam and the compression which takes off the blood, that's the purpose with everything, compression, leg elevation, whatever we are doing. So we are injecting small areas and compressing it, and we compress it for 30 seconds so that we give the time for the sclerosant to act on the wall. So, by which we are actually able to treat more than 25 millimeters, 30, like there is no size, as Dr. Malay Patel has said. So any size we are able to treat with that. We have treated up to 45 millimeters vein, like this big vein fits.
Oh yeah. Aneurysmal. So, I will add to this that Deki, especially to Deki, we do this Indian hack, or as we call it in India, the Indian jugaad. What I do is I have these sclerosants, my syringes, everything that it comes out of the refrigerator or from the almost from the freezer compartment. So they come out. So everything is cold at that time. So your injection is a cold solution almost, or less than room temperature. So you will get a better spasm. That's the idea. So that's one thing that I have learned. The other thing is, and as I always say, and like Rahul says, that that little compression. So basically, sclerotherapy is still an art waiting for its science. So that's what I say.
Dr. Ayman, do you want to ask any question? Professor Ayman? Are you still?
Yes, thank you, Rahul, and thank you, Malay. It was very nice talking. I enjoyed it very much. I'd like to ask you, do you see some cases of matting, and how? What's your tips and tricks in preventing matting during sclerotherapy?
I'm on Eid Mubarak. Happy Eid. And so,
thank you.
No, matting, I think the only way that you have to do is you will probably have to, in the sense, when you are injecting these reticular veins, be sure that you have the feeder that's injected, because you will have that appearance. I really don't have a way of preventing matting. I mean, no foolproof way of that you can do that. So your question will probably still stay unanswered for quite some time. That is what I think.
Okay. Dr. PC Gupta, do you want to ask any question, please? Dr. PC? Are you here?
Hi, Dr. Malay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Harry.
Hi,
nice,
good evening.
Nice patka.
I was at home today. Good evening, Dr. Fakri also, and we all wish you a very happy Eid, and everybody else in the conference. Now, Malay, my question to you, I might have missed one slide regarding migraine. One of my patients severe migraine, and later when we investigated, we found she had a tiny little PFO. So then I read about it, and possibly history of migraine may possibly be a contraindication. What is your opinion about that?
Yes, absolutely. If a patient has that, then try and avoid doing this, because what happens is that your small bubble may go through a PFO or whatever. And as I mentioned at that time, that Harry here would be able to give us a better percentage, that almost everybody has small holes in the interatrial septum. But it is the left to right shunt that is very important. For these sorts of complications, most significant for these sorts of complications. So when you have a left to right shunt, your small bubble may go into the cerebral circulation and create a vasospasm of a small artery, and will give you that exactly, the aura followed by the headache and this and that. And that is where the nitrogen bubble is most notorious. That is why when you start using carbon dioxide, or you may have to switch over to a liquid sclerosant in such sort of patients. But I would certainly avoid doing the procedure again.
Dr. PC Gupta, any questions? Dr. PC Gupta, can you hear me?
Malay, if I could ask one question, couple of questions here. First of all, a comment.
Sure.
Shoaib Pararia, very nice.
Guys, if everybody starts speaking like this on the webinar, we will be getting confused. Please, let's speak one by one. Dr. Pararia, please, I'll just give you a chance. Just a minute.
All right.
Dr. PC Gupta, please. No, he's not responding. Dr. Pataria, please carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, so now a couple of questions, comments here. First of all, regarding the symptoms following foam sclerotherapy, we've had several patients of ours who on table will complain of chest discomfort or chest tightness or a little bit of cough immediately after injecting sclerosant. Since all our patients are monitored, we do see a slight fall in the oxygen saturation to around 90 to 92. However, this is very transient, and this basically responds very well without doing anything within a matter of few minutes itself. Some of our patients have also complained of slight headache. Again, within a matter of 15-20 minutes, as soon as they are mobilized, the headache tends to disappear. So these transient symptoms are not very rare. If you look out for them, they are quite common. And so, but on the whole, I don't think there's much to worry about as long as your volume of sclerosant is not very large. Number two, as far as the point of matting is concerned, especially if there are the veins which are very superficial in fair-skinned individuals, I have found that if large amount of volumes of sclerosant are injected into these veins and they form a thrombotic element in these veins, some of which may require tapping, then almost 99% of them will develop some linear pigmentation. On the other hand, after injection, if you do a roller mechanism on these veins, like what Dr. Dekiwade was suggesting many years ago in the form of a foam roller, which he used to apply on the vein. So we apply that sort of a foam roller on the vein after injecting the sclerosant, effectively emptying the entire vein out and keeping it empty, because many a times after you inject foam, you'll realize that the vein tends to fill back again. And when it fills back again, it fills with blood. And this is responsible for the thrombus. If we can wait for a minute or two and not allow this to happen, then that vein collapses permanently and then it closes well, and the matting also decreases significantly. I don't know what the comments of the other colleagues are on this.
Dr. Malay, please. Yes, Dr. Patel.
Yeah. Shoaib, do you use a physiological gas or do you use air?
I use a what?
Do you use CO2 or do you use air?
No, regular air. I use, I know you use 1:4. I use 2:5. And second, and that's how I basically use the foam, yes.
But you know, I think you probably, if you switched over to carbon dioxide, this chest discomfort would almost disappear.
Possible. Secondly, what do the colleagues use for dilution of the foam? Let us say you have 3% polydocanol or 3% sodium tetradecyl sulfate. how do you dilute this to make a lower concentration? Do you use water for injection? Do you use normal saline, or use 5% dextrose? I have had differing answers from different people. So what is the consensus opinion here?
Hello, can I Dr. Patel, you want to answer?
Yeah, I use water for injection.
Yes. So I always use distilled water for injection. The thing is because it's a neutral.
Correct.
And you know, that's the only reason, because there are not much studies published on what will be the chemical reaction with sodium chloride and what will be the chemical reaction with dextrose. So I don't know, because people have been using a mixture of dextrose and sclerosant anyway. So maybe a dilute dextrose and sclerosant may be the point, but where I don't want to mix up the detergents, and because at present I am not very comfortable in mixing the detergents, because, you know, whatever reasons. Dr. Malay Patel, please. Yeah.
Yeah. See, the thing is that glucose is very inert. Glucose and polytocanol will not react. And there are papers about this in the Spanish literature that have come out of Brazil and Argentina. And they use this, and they have used this in humans, in fact, without any consequence. Because glucose, again, if you ask any chemist, basic chemist, he will say nothing will react, almost nothing will react with glucose. So,
sir, there are a lot of questions. Please, we need to take it up. And before we ask any more questions from us,
I want one further to a clarification to the migraine, if Rahul, you allow me.
Yes, sir.
Maybe you are a cardiothoracic surgeon and I am a long forgotten cardiothoracic guy. Migraine, PFO and foam injection. What I remember that an ASD or a PFO, there would be left to right shunt. For foam to enter into the arterial circulation, you have to have a right to left shunt.
Right to left shunt, correct.
So normally this doesn't exist. Even if there is a PFO, there is no shunting of the blood to the left side of the circulation, that is the arterial. Then how is PFO and migraine joined? Vedi, I think you'll be able to throw some light.
Yeah, this is very, very interesting. And anybody, I have good cardiologist, and sometimes when we have our meetings, there is something called a streaming. So it may not be a right to left shunt, but sometimes blood, just by the nature of the site of the PFO, blood from the right can go to the left. So that's called hemodynamic streaming. Second factor is that I think Malay told us that when you inject, you can create very, very, very high pressures. And it's possible that that pressure causes for temporarily the shunt to right to left. Third is actually MRI findings, which have shown after sclerotherapy, you can have actually a physical defect in the brain. So in spite of the shunt being ideally left to right, you can still have a right to left temporarily due to either streaming or due to a massive high injection. So I hope that answers the question.
Sir, can it be explained by, because when you see, you know, when we have an ASD, it is one part of the septum. It's not like totally in the center, you know, it's there. And these bubbles, once they reach the right atrium, they could be lighter and they could be upper part of the, column. And then from the right to the left, they could go there.
That's the streaming.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. That's what
streaming.
Streaming.
That's the streaming you explained.
Yeah. You know, because the blood will come from the left to right and it will push the top thing on the left side. You know, there could be a mixture of that.
We accept it, difficult to digest, but we accept.
Yeah. We have to ask questions, please, from the audience also, because that's the proper way.
The migraine could be migraine could be endothelin mediated.
Yeah. Sir,
let's go to the questions.
Yeah, all questions to you now. How to avoid lymphedema and how to manage it in post-operative period?
No, lymphedema, you will have some swelling in the legs. It is inconsequential. It is probably a reactionary. It is probably inflammation around the veins that is now producing some edema. So this is a sort of it's always probably after an endoablation there is some sort of lymphedema that usually occurs. So that you cannot avoid, but it is self-limiting. It goes away in about at least 6 to 8 weeks, it will settle down. Or otherwise you have to resort to giving compression and insist that your patient has compression.
Yeah. So next is, what is the difference in craniocaudal and caudocranial method of injecting? You mentioned it. But
caudocranial is you start from the distal to caudocranial is you start from the distal. You start in the lower leg and go upwards, or you start in the upper leg and go upwards. And craniocaudal is used to. I'm using the craniocaudal or the caudocranial terminology just to avoid any confusion about the proximal and distal. So I try to be, when I say it's caudocranial, it means that you start from the lower leg or the upper leg.
And there is a comment from one of the persons that to prevent refilling after you have injected the few millimeter, after you have injected the foam, you can inject a pure air, because that will push the foam and will prevent blood refilling.
Okay.
Comments, yeah.
Well, the like Deki said, that it is all makes it cumbersome, makes it a little more complicated, raising the leg, this and that. What you can do is actually cannulate the vein and just tape it, then raise the leg, and then inject. So that is one way of trying to avoid the movement of the needle once the leg is elevated, or trying to inject in an elevated leg, trying to find the vein, which again makes it difficult. So I do agree with Deki, but probably avoiding that by cannulating the vein. Now, I have no experience with injecting the air or creating an airlock after this injection of the foam. So anybody else has got that experience, please?
No, sir. So there is a well-described method in the literature, what we call as gas foam sclerotherapy. If you look into the literature, so there is an article on it. And what they do is, they are described is that you inject first, put in a needle, put in a CO2, approximate amount 5 to 10 ml of CO2 in that particular segment. So that will displace the blood, and then you inject the foam into that. So that's what they're described as gas foam sclerotherapy. But this technique has never been validated as compared to a simple foam sclerotherapy. And so we don't know what is the results. So the next question is there an outcome difference if you inject craniocaudal or caudocranial method? Is there anything reported in the literature on that?
No. It all depends upon what your understanding of the situation. There are some people who would like to plug the maximum point of reflux first. I like to go from distal to proximal, that is from the lower leg to the upper leg, and then into the thigh. So that's a personal preference how you do that. So nothing in the literature to prove one's method superiority over the other.
Sure. Now the whole thing is open. If anybody wants to ask question, please, you need to raise your hand.
There's one more question. Okay.
No, sir.
Rahul has answered it. Yeah, Rahul has answered it.
Yeah. Because you have already mentioned in your talk already, so there is no point taking that.
Sir, there is one more question is there.
Okay, please.
So it was from Dr. Anjali again, that in small AV malformations, whether sclero is good or glue.
Okay.
Now, AV malformations or a venous malformation, we have to be clear here, because if it's a small venous malformation, I think foam sclerosant is a very good method of just doing that. Now, if you have an AV malformation, then we're talking of something little more complicated. How you do that? How you inject the nidus first, or go from the nidus and then come towards the periphery, or you try to inject in such a way that your foam or your sclerosant does not go on towards the arterial side. So these are different questions. But venous malformation, foam sclerosant will work very well.
Thank you, sir.
Malay, may I ask? Malay?
Yes.
Now, since we are on this topic of sclero in other indications, sometimes we do use sclero along with alcohol in these malfunctions. So what is your opinion about the interaction of the sclero and the alcohol? Should we mix them together? Should we give them sequentially? And is there a place at all for this combination in varicose veins?
I don't have that experience to do that. The maximum that we've done that is to mix alcohol with the radio opaque contrast and then inject and see. So basically, I've not mixed alcohol and the sclerosants as we know them. So that's something that I've not done. But I will do that if after alcohol injection, if there's some residual areas, then on a second session that the patient comes after a few days, I will use foam, but not at the same time.
It has been used by some people. I've used it a few number of times.
Okay.
Maybe Rahul might have used that for venous malformation, combining both.
Yes, sir. So we have used nearly all the methods, foam sclerotherapy with alcohol, foam sclerotherapy, alcohol plus laser.
No, that's what I'm asking. Foam and alcohol, how do you do it? Do you mix them or do you give it separately?
No, sir, I don't mix them. I don't mix any solution. Yeah. So
into the same
I will,
malformation, but separately.
Yeah, but yeah, I will inject an alcohol first. And the reason is very simple, because alcohol causes a very severe spasm immediately. And so I want that the foam should, because it works on the same principle. I don't want any blood there. So I will inject a small amount of alcohol. And if there is a small one, so there is no outflow tracts. So I will just inject a small amount of alcohol, cause it into spasm, and then inject a foam out of that.
But Rahul, injecting the alcohol into the vein is very painful. You don't think?
Yeah, of course. Of course, I do all venous malformations under regional anesthesia. I have stopped doing them under local anesthesia, most of them now.
Okay.
Because then I'm very free. I can burn them more, and I actually burn them more. So I have to use laser because now I'm using steam also in some patients, and steam is very painful even with tumescence.
Yes, very painful.
So that's why I'm using most of them. I'm doing under regional now. Yeah. There is another question is Dr. Sonu Patidar is there, and he's asking his question. What is the importance of SFJ competence or incompetence in sclerotherapy? You know, I don't know, but I think he needs to rephrase this question in a slightly better form, what he wants to ask. And what is the incidence of recurrence? Because it's a very, Dr. Sonu, you need to ask this question in a slightly better format, because it's a very long answer. SFJ competence, incompetence, it's very difficult to answer in one line. Because if you have an SFJ incompetence,
okay, I think I probably understand. He's asking that if there is an SFJ competent, but then you have varicosities, then you inject the varicosities. I think if you have an SFJ incompetence, then you have to take care of that, the truncal reflux. I think probably that's what his question
please
required an answer. And incidence of recurrence, yes, there is a recurrence, of course, but in the end, if you are using multiple sessions and multiple sites, you will get the vein. And by the end of, so you have to follow the method of multiple injections and multiple sessions. So in the end, you won't have, you would have a recurrence that is equal to or recanalization rates that is the same. So you will match all the other endoablation methods. Just one shot sclerotherapy, yes, you are going to have a higher recurrence rates. You're going to have a higher recanalization. But you repeat the procedure over time, you will match all other endoablation methods.
Dr. Piyush, any questions you want to ask? Dr. Piyush? He's
muted.
He's muted. Dr. Piyush, you are muted.
Oh, sorry. So there was one question in my mind, like it was said that around 10 to 20 cc is the limit for the sclerotherapy in between.
Yes.
So if you have large varicosities in both legs, and they are very, very large varicosities, so what should be the strategy? Should we treat one leg or both legs? Or
so treat one leg one day, I would suggest use sodium tetraethyl sulfate for the refluxing, the truncal reflux on one side the first day, and then you can use the do the other leg the next day. Now, here I will give you another tip that these sclerotherapists across the world are doing. You know, sometimes you have patients that have come from distant parts and they say, Sir, we have only 3 days. And in 3 days, you have to take care of everything. So what you can do is, once you have reached that 10-20 cc's limit, you can call your patient back again on the same day after 3 hours. Ask him to wait. This is not scientific evidence. I'm just saying that this is a practical solution to what, and this is being done by Kusat in Istanbul. His unit does this all the time. They have these Turkish people who come from different parts of Europe. They come, they have just 3 or 4 days. They have to get everything done, and they get it done then.
So again, a follow-up question regarding this. So how much amount we are going to inject then in the second sitting after 3 hours?
Oh, see, once you've injected your the next follow-up injection, you can still use the same volume. So you can still use 10 cc's again.
Like after 3 hours. So.
Yeah, because all the effects by that time have gone away.
Okay, right, sir. Thank you.
Any other question?
Dr. Patel, sir, you mean to say that we can inject around 40-50 cc in one day?
It's theoretically not to be done, but practically there are people in the world who are doing this. I have not done it. I personally have not done this, but because this is a very close session, and we all of us know each other and so forth, this is being practiced by a few people, and you can start, we can do this.
I will not start that way.
That's why I don't do this.
Dr. Patel, we have injected up to 38 to 40 ml in one session, and in not one patient, we may have injected in 8 to 10 patients. 18 to 25 ml injection, we do it routinely, and using 4 vials, that means 8 ml and 8 ml into 4 to 5 means 30 to 32 ml of foam. And so we are trying, we have not had a problem with any of these patients. And but I think there are ways to do it. If I'm doing this in that patient, I take around 1.5 to quarter to 2 hours, because I'm injecting slowly. So I'm not in hurry. I don't inject in pressure. I do it under ultrasound. Second is, we are trying to develop all these compression methods and everything, trying to decrease the dosage as much as possible, so that I don't have to inject higher volumes. But in terms of practical forms, we have injected higher volumes without any side effects, and it's not one case where we have got through it, but we have injected in multiple cases. And but I will not recommend in a session like this that people who are just starting the sclerotherapy or have got mild experience, that they should get an idea that we can do it. I think we should restrict to the volumes which are described in the literature, and which goes to the 15 to 20 ml max.
But Rahul, that much amount is not required even for the both legs. Both legs are, we use it. One leg is around 6 to 8 ml is sufficient for one leg, because after that it is spreaded all over the leg.
I will send you the photograph of a patient.
That I understand that.
And in normal patients, we inject, I told you, normal patients we inject 3 to 4 ml of foam per leg. That's all.
Yes.
We are talking about very, very rare cases.
Massive varicosity.
Rahul, can I add a comment here?
Yes, please.
Can I add a comment?
Yes, sir, please.
Dr. Sandeep Agarwal and Malay, this discussion about amount of foam have had with phlebologists who are doing cosmetic work both from Canada and from southern United States, especially Florida area, because there are a lot of cosmetic work being done there. Most of the time they are using sodium tetraethyl sulfate rather than polydocanol. And there also they tend to basically finish the entire procedure in one sitting as far as possible. Because these are non-insurance patients, these are cash paying patients who come once. And my discussions with them over the last decade or so has been that the volume of foam being injected in a leg in one extremity is anywhere between 25 to 45 cc's of foam.
Is this air or?
Hold on. If injected slowly, gradually, with due precautions, all of us then say that there has been no complication. I have been now doing venous work since 2003. And I can tell you confidently that 90% of my patients will get foam sclerotherapy at the same sitting, either with laser or any other thermal method. And the average amount of vials that we open in any single patient for one leg is between 2 to 4. This is of 3% polydocanol. We always inject 1.5%. I don't inject 3% at all. So you can calculate the amount of foam that we are injecting. Can be anywhere between 20 to 40 cc's. As I said earlier in my comment, some of my patients have some degree of chest tightness, but very transient, very minimal. And I've noticed maybe 3 or 4 patients who had a, as I told you, headache. This accompanied with a little bit of fall in the SpO2, which comes back immediately within a matter of few minutes. So overall with the discussions, I think in experienced hands, if done carefully, a large amount of foam is not really worth it. Let me also add one last point here. And this point is very important. Every country has different rules and regulations regarding insurance. In the United States, they will do short saphenous system once, great saphenous system other time, perforator other time, and sclerotherapy at another sitting. 4 or 5 sittings. Why? Because they can bill the patient individually every single time it is allowed by the insurance companies. In our sitting, it is not allowed. And therefore, it is important for us to, if it's an insurance patient, to try and do it at one sitting as far as possible. So that also dictates why we have to use all these techniques together, if necessary, some little bit extra in order to give the full result in one sitting. It's a practical point in this country.
Agree, Shoaib. All the points are valid. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Malay Patel, the final, any answer? So we can close the session now. It's 5:31.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Any points you want to make? Dr. Patel, any points you want to make?
No, just Rahul, a question to you. When you are using these high volumes, are you using air or you using physiological gases?
No, sir. I am using
air.
Always air. I am using all air.
Air, always.
Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Patari is also using air and he is also using high volumes. I didn't know that he is using such, but in our practice, we have been using high volumes from so many years now. And we, in our early practice, we used to have symptoms. And so as we have stopped injecting very fast, and as we modified this method of pressing the foam for 30 seconds after each injection, we have actually eliminated these complications of chest tightness, headache, and all. And the only symptoms what we get in some patients is, we always try to take these patients, we don't allow them to walk for 15 to 20 minutes. Because if you inject more than 15 ml foam, all these patients, they feel dizzy for 15 to 15 minutes. And so we, if you allow them to get up and walk, so we allow them after 15 to 20 minutes, they are absolutely all these foams, all the effects of that settles down. And so it gives us a good results. So Dr. Piyush, any comments you want to make, last comments?
I think that's it, sir.
Okay.
So it's been said.
Thank you, Dr. Piyush, Dr. Malay Patel, Dr. Sandeep, Dr. Bedi, Dr. Padaria, Dr. Tiwadia.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Just last line, don't miss it on Wednesday. It's a very interesting topic. Dr. Padaria is going to take up 2 important topics, and thyroid and varicose veins, and the neural effects of the treatment for varicose veins. They're very, very important topics, both of them.
Yeah.
Please all of you guys come and attend it. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
And take care, everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye, sir.